going to go ahead and convene. So this is the call to order for the Friday, April 25th, 2025 Budget and Finance Committee meeting for CCS. The time is now 1:31, and Beth, will you call the roll, please?
And I see you a lot.
Yay.
Austin,
Here.
Christensen. I see a
Sorry,
wave.
here.
DiDonato is absent. Gardner,
Here.
Jacobson,
Here.
Lakshman Narayan. I see a wave. And Yolande.
Here.
Sorry, Wilburn. Sorry about that. And then I skipped Leslie. Sorry, Jakaki.
Here.
And then for CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski and Beth Stoneburner.
Great. Thank you all. Thanks for being here. We have an agenda for the meeting. Do you all have all the documents in front of you for today's meeting? Are there any additions to the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll proceed to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment? Seeing none, we will move on to our first order of business, which is the review and approval of the minutes of the February 26th, 2025 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Vishwar. I will second. Is there any discussion? All right, Beth, can we have a roll call?
Austin,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Jakaki.
Yes.
Thank you. Lakshman Narayan and Wilburn. Thank you.
Okay, we have minutes. All right, so item 6 on the agenda is the review of the fiscal year 25-26 budget, and I will turn it over to Rebecca.
If it's okay with you, Anthony, I do have some slides put together, and there's a little bit of not super specific budget stuff, but related that we'll cover. So it's a little bit out of order on the agenda, but
Sure.
I wanted to make sure I addressed questions from last year. Let's see. Zoom and I are in dispute. Let me just switch around my monitors. Sorry that I am not ready for that. Okay. We are in business. Okay. So we had a lot of questions come up at the last meeting, and so I want to address some of them kind of up top, and then we'll get into the specifics of the budget. So kind of open concern is federal and state fundings. Ishwar had asked about CCS investment opportunities. We had talked about what does it look like if a CCS member leaves? What's the impact of a potential fee increase coupled with using the LSAP support grant for other uses, and then CCS membership value in general. So kind of diving in, state and federal funding. I was at Rails for the Consortia Committee meeting on Monday and heard the following from Monica, is that the state library has instructed Rails to plan for level funding. The state library intends to fully fund Rails at the level they were funded this fiscal. If, there's a lot up in the air about the IMLS grants to states program, which is the mechanism by which IMLS funds get to the state library, which then some of which in turn go to Rails. If none of the lawsuits and or common sense prevail, there's a potential 10% shortfall in the IMLS budget. Separate from this potential funding loss, Secretary Janulius had already requested some additional funding in his budget that I believe was intended to fund a new digital equity program, not the statewide database, it's a different program. So it's possible that that additional funding would, instead of being used for that digital equity, replace the 10% shortfall at the state library. Rails has no plans to discontinue or reduce funding for LSAPs, for the LSAP support grant or the new member grant, which is relevant to us as well. And so with that, in my draft budget, I'm planning that we would receive full funding from Rails for the LSAP support grant. Questions on that? I don't have a ton of information, but that's what we're hearing from Rails at this time. Okay. Beth has done some initial reach outs around CCS investment opportunities. Our current accountants, as you probably know, cannot provide investment guidance for us. So we did reach out to Wintrust, and they do have like a financial advisory kind of wing. And so once the budget is approved and we have a more formal sense of cash needs, we'll meet with them to talk about options and go over the fiscal accountability policy with them, as there are limits on what our investment vehicles can look like. So that's still on our agenda, but no real update in this arena yet. And then talking about what happens if a CCS member leaves. Per our policies, when a member leaves, they are responsible for their share of CCS group commitments that were made before its decision to terminate. So this is our, like, haven't run this past any attorneys or anything. But my reading of that would be, let's say next year we sign a new 5-year agreement with Innovative, and each library has a certain number of licenses with Innovative that, you know, roll up into our bundle. My reading is that the library would be responsible for the costs associated with those licenses for the remainder of the contract. It talks about the commitments, not like the fiscal year. So that's how I'm reading that. I think if we did have a member that would leave, I'm not interested in making things difficult for any library anywhere. So I would work as diligently as possible to negotiate out of fees that we no longer need, rather than just charging someone because our policy says we can. The leaving member would also have to pay associated costs with getting the data out from CCS, and of course, whatever they would be setting up on their end to move the data into. And then the policy also calls out a monthly fee for a discount program. So like if the library was a Collection HQ library and they left before the termination of the Collection HQ agreement, that CCS could assess an administrative fee during that period. I'm like less interested in doing that. But they wouldn't be able to renew with us, but they'd be able to keep the discount for the remainder of the purchase. But what does that look like practically for the rest of the members involved? I'm missing my data labels. That's cute. So I looked at, the short answer is it depends on the library. And, you know, if I had infinite time, I was envisioning this like very cool thing where you could like choose which library was leaving and when in the contract year they were leaving. And it was going to be like a choose your own adventure. I did not complete that. But I looked at the total spending within CCS and what is kind of like a direct license to a member versus not what's necessarily overhead, because it includes things that's not like rent and utilities, but things that where the pricing wouldn't change if a member left. And so based on our policy, this unlabeled blue wedge is the direct licenses that members pay. So under our policy, a leaving library would still be responsible for that blue wedge or their portion of that blue wedge. And so the remaining members in the next fiscal year would have to make up the difference of that outgoing library in the orange wedge. And again, it depends on which library leaves, but that 75% of our fees are split equally among all libraries. It's not really a huge range. So I would anticipate about a $1,500 increase and maybe a little bit, like I said here, $1,500 to $2,500 per library, depending on who left. And again, assuming that nobody else came in. So definitely not nothing, but it would not be a calamitous event, I don't think, in the CCS like financial situation. And there is a version of this chart with data labels in that you'll have access to as well. I'm pausing for questions, and you're seeing the side of my face because now my cameras are all askew. Any questions?
I had a question about the investment.
Yeah.
You're currently invested in like that Wintrust money market, if I'm remembering right.
Mm-hmm.
And what rate's that at right now? It's like Illinois funds +1 or something, plus 0.1.
Yeah.
So it's like 4.5% right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good. I know like we're looking at interest rates potentially dropping in the future and like I know there's lots of 6% like 10-year, 20-year, 30-year US treasuries,
Mm-hmm.
but like are we really looking 30 years? Like I don't know that CCS should be looking 30 years ahead.
No. And that's one of the reasons we're like, well, let's not even meet with someone until we do this next budget. My proposal that I'll be sharing with you today has significant development fund spending planned. And so there is planned to be a lot more movement of money in and out of the development fund, in from the Rails grant and out for subscriptions that I am anticipating over the next several years. I also think that the spirit of our reserve policy for like our operating reserves is that it is liquid and available to us. So I wouldn't want to invest our reserves in any sort of long-term tool. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of change that would be reasonable for us, but I'm happy to look into it and gain a better understanding of what's out there.
Well, you can always sell long-term tools. If you buy a US Treasury, let's say a $500,000 US Treasury at $400,000 now, in 2 years it's gonna be like $450. So you're still gonna make $50,000 or whatever it is. So you can do that. You can sell things early. It's not the end of the world getting a 30-year or something like that. But but it takes more time and then you have to pay the investment advisor and stuff like that.
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Does this info about a potential member exit satisfy the questions that were raised at the last meeting, or are you looking for more detailed, specific numbers on anything?
This is satisfactory. Every time we have a member join, our prices go down, generally speaking, about $1,500 to $2,500. So you did a lot of work for something that I think I intuited pretty quickly. But of course, it depends. If we had Chicago Public Library join, our prices would go down significantly, but maybe not to all our benefit.
Yes. Yeah. And that is kind of how it shook out, but I'm happy to do the math on the back end to make sure my assumptions are real. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to the budget document in a minute. But I did kind of pull together a summary that I don't think is always clear from kind of the format of our budget document. So the starting balances that I have listed here are based on the projections for the remainder of this fiscal. And then our planned income for next fiscal year. So that income line for operating does include a fee increase. That also includes OCLC in there. And individual library billings. The development fund income is pretty specifically interest and the Rails grant. And then expenditures, you can see that in the operating fund, we would still, like we did this year, we would plan to operate at a small deficit. We have the room in our reserves to do that. And the same in development, we'd be planning to spend down our development funds for these new services and projects that we're planning to implement. So overall, we would expect with the proposed budget, a change in our net position of $180,000, which is different than what we've been seeing. It's kind of like we've been doing a lot of research, like we've been kind of operating on the status quo. This past year, we've done a lot of research. We've been thinking about a lot of things. And then as we start implementing those things, like there are associated costs that are in the budget now. So I want to pause there. I have approximately 100 million more slides. We don't have to go through them all. I can do that first and then we can take questions. But if you have already reviewed things and you have like specific questions that you want to make sure I address, I would rather start there than go through my my planned remarks if you've got a list. And if you're like, hit me with the planned remarks, I'll do it.
Hit me with the planned remarks.
All right. Okay. So looking at the breakdown for operating specifically, here we have the budget for our current fiscal year and the proposed budget. You can see we're looking at an increase to library billings of just under $125,000. OCLC billings, we're anticipating an increase there as well because we always anticipate an increase from OCLC. Individual library OCLC and individual library charges are both pass-throughs. There's no actual effect on library billings on those. We also now have a very modest credit card reward system. So we are anticipating increasing library billings by just under 7%. Total increase to income would be 8%, but again, that includes some pass-through information. So what is happening with that money? Where are these extra funds going? The biggest increase is the proposed addition of a staff member. The job description is still being developed, but this staff member would likely have the title something like Manager of Technology and Analytics. So our IT manager, as I think many of you know, has not been with CCS for about 1.5 years, and we've been using outsourced solutions for IT management during that time. So this position would partially replace that position, but they would not be an IT manager. They would be, they would have technological skills, but they would be focused on managing the data analytics program that we are looking to build out within CCS. So that total personnel increase includes existing staff salary increases as well as the addition of the position. And that total personnel, where I have it marked as like 4XX, that's all of the related personnel lines, including benefits and taxes. I skipped ILS maintenance, but that increase is largely, we've got an annual uplift in our contract of 2.5%. And then that's additional licenses for new libraries. So that spending in particular is offset by, most of that spending is offset by the addition of a new member who will be paying into the fees. The rest of our budget lines are, relatively flat. We are looking to move to a cloud-based phone notice system, and that hits the datacom line in 4115. So that we're expecting a small reduction in our, right now we have a bundle from AT&T that's the analog phone lines as well as our office internet. So we'd be reducing those fees, but then taking on the annual subscription for the phone notification, for a cloud-based phone notification service. Members will get some additional benefits from the cloud-based phone notification system, including an online portal where they can better troubleshoot phone notice issues if they so choose on their own, as well as individualized caller ID per library, which I think is a pretty nice service for those members or for those patrons that are regular phone notice users. Capital, we're expecting to replace some of our internal laptops. We do every 3 to 4-ish years, and it's staggered, so it's not everybody at once. Annual increase in rent, and then some savings in electronic resources due to the statewide database purchase. So that line is specifically RDA Toolkit, which is pretty nominal, and then Novelist Select, Novelist Plus, so like the plus component only of Novelist at this time, and Library Aware. I did look at with the statewide database purchase and like the reduction in that line overall. I did do a price comparison with the Rails group purchase for interested. If we wanted to discontinue this service within CCS, the CCS pricing is still much more competitive than the Rails pricing. So even if like there are some libraries that don't use Library Aware, the overall payment that we're making is less than if our libraries got the Rails package or those components of the Rails package individually. So I'm not proposing cutting that at this time. So as you can see, most of the new spending and operating is that new employee. Additional spending would be out of the development fund for like the new subscriptions. So we'll get to those. I did put together this slide of CCS fees over time, and like, boy, that looks terrible for this year. But when we add in some additional context, over these years, we've added several libraries, and the addition of the libraries means even though from FY20 to FY26, member fees are increasing, overall, the average bill per library, even with an increase in fiscal 26, is still lower than it was for those same participating libraries in fiscal 20. There is also, you have this link. Table charts. There's a lot going on here, but this is fees over time is that slide we just looked at. You'll notice here there's a library selector. So you can choose a library and see what an individual library's fees have done over these years. It does allow you to multi-select, but Excel and I have had a battle, and it sums the libraries all together. Like, you're not comparing libraries, you're adding them together. So the multi-select is not super beneficial. But this is, I think, a handy tool if you want to see, again, how your library in particular has been affected by fee changes over time. So again, this chart looks very different when we look at all members versus individual. So let's go the Indian Trails. That was not an old enough example or a new. So you can see that Palatine wasn't a member in fiscal 20. So Palatine coming on, they had an implementation year, during which they paid less over the course of the year, and then came up to their sort of like standard of member fees. You can also toggle this to look at OCLC fees. Again, there's some variation there because as new members come in, how they affect the distribution of fee formula changes. Or you can look at CCS and OCLC membership together with a control click to look at your own library. So this is linked in the PowerPoint. You have the PowerPoint, and so you should be able to access this document. So the question from last year is, what does that look like in conjunction with the Rails rebate? What's the total member fee impact for these proposed changes? So I have each library here. There's a text version in that same linked document. But essentially what we're looking at is a typo that this should be minimum. For fee change, we've got the minimum, median, and the average are usually pretty close with CCS. There's not a huge difference in most of the things we do. And then the maximum fee change. I did look into why 2 libraries had decreases, and it's really because of our fee formula, and they had, even with the 3-year rolling average, a rather significant decrease in where they fall in the percent whole of tax receipts. And then because of when they joined CCS, Warren Newport also hadn't received the Rails member rebate yet. So they're the only library that is doesn't have that blue bar, is because they didn't have access to those funds yet. So for most members, the Rails rebate, well, not most members, the way the Rails rebate was distributed to members included a component based on library finances. So like the least funded libraries got more of the funds. So that is why when we look, at like Zion and Cary, our smallest libraries, they're seeing the biggest impact in this member fee change. It's not the member fee, it's the loss of the Rails rebate, of which they were entitled to more under our previous distribution model. Questions on this slide? So we still have a lot of unknowns. So at the same meeting where the board will be voting on this budget, we expect that they will vote on a discovery layer. Our 2 front runners have 2 very different price tags. Although again, split over multiple libraries, it's not a tremendous difference. But the draft budget, I have a total in the development fund spending for $150,000 for year 1 for the discovery layer. So that wouldn't, if we took the pricier option and weren't able to negotiate down, there would still be an addition. We'd be a little over budget when it comes, because that doesn't include the implementation. But for the other option, we'd be under budget. But it's like, I kind of like split the difference a little because it's development and doesn't directly impact the member fee billing for next year. I was comfortable with that ambiguity. Similarly, we are committed to find more for this next fiscal, but then looking forward, are we continuing with Find More Illinois or not? Again, that's been development spending, but as we're increasing these things that we're like, well, it's development spending, that's going to affect our development balance. And, eventually there will not be money in there and it will become billing or, we are also we're the day after governing board, representatives from Innovative will be on site to begin contract negotiations. So, what that annual increase from Innovative looks like, what we can negotiate about keeping license costs down for new members, that's all in the air. And then new members beyond Wakanda. We expect the governing board will vote to add Wakanda Public Library to CCS. Their board has already made that vote and is looking forward to CCS membership. That said, because CCS has not voted yet, Wakanda is not included in our budget and billings yet. And they'd be in implementation anyway, so they'll be included in the budget year starting July 1 of 2027. So they will pay into CCS next year, but those funds are not included in like CCS billings. I'm going to switch to a spreadsheet after this, and hopefully this will all make more sense. My recommendation at this time is that we maintain the data tool and discovery layer with the development fund special software line until 2031. My projections include the assumption of a 2% increase in expenditures annually, which is pretty conservative. We generally have not had to do that and have not seen that, but I'd rather overestimate what things will cost than underestimate and come into trouble in the future. Similarly, this assumes that there would be no new libraries. Again, it doesn't even include Wakanda, and we are confident in Wakanda. We're also talking with a couple other libraries as well. And so we do anticipate there will be some new libraries in the next 5 to 7 years. But as Beth keeps reminding me very wisely, eventually we'll run out of libraries in our geographic area. So this is not a forever tool for us to add a new library and redistribute those funds. It's assuming Rails funding is flat, whereas if we increase libraries, the Rails funding would increase as well, or conversely, if Rails ran into issues and we didn't get the Rails funding, then we would have a shortfall in my projections. So this sort of not quite worst case scenario, but conservative scenario does look at continuing increases in CCS funds for some years. And I want to jump to a different document. This one. So this is like my beautiful mind spreadsheet. This was sort of the last thing I was working on, and this is where I'm getting those numbers. Again, this past year and this year, the recommendation is to operate at a small deficit, but if we have to catch up that deficit. So that's part of the fee increase. And from my mind, I'd rather not spike fees now if CCS has the financial capacity to support members and put off some amount of increase in the event that things change. Again, we don't know what the Innovative contract is going to look like. We don't know, like, Yolanda, I'm always trying to get rid of OCLC. I don't want to overcorrect preemptively and increase fees too much too fast, both for out of concern for library budgets, but also not knowing what the future holds. So you'll see sometimes I talk about billing expenditures as I do on this sheet. And that is to kind of differentiate and pull out OCLC versus OCLC and individual library charges, because that's, again, not factored in necessarily to the CCS member fees line on your invoices. So I spent some time playing around, projecting some different scenarios where, what if we move things to the operating fund sooner? What if we kept them in development later? What does our development fund balance look like? And at this time, I do have Find More Illinois. Again, this is like being conservative. I have Find More Illinois continuing through 2028. But if CCS had to make a recommendation today, we would not recommend continuing with Find More Illinois. But there is a chance that our recommendation could change in the next 6 months with some changes coming to Find More. So if we look at this section that is not labeled, this is development. This is potentially development fund. So we've got development fund expenditures, and then the Rails grant. Again, you can see that's a flat amount for the Rails grant. So we can leave this spending in development for several years. And as long as that Rails grant is coming in, we're in a really good place with the development fund balance. And so I'd rather do that than start shoving new spending into operating. Like, what if we don't like Orange Boy? What if, something changes and a company goes out of business and we have to change another ILS or something? So this is here for you to look at. And so you can see I kind of like staggered the fee increases until we're back to, and this is a little bit overbilled as well in the event that we needed to, rebuild development, which I'm hoping we don't. I'm going to pause again.
Yeah, I have a question, Rebecca. So, I kind of came in sort of after when Find More had already been sort of approved. So I'm just wondering, was that something that, and I'm sure you did, looked at the Polaris sort of, or Clarivate alternative, LinkedIn, in California, it's Link Plus.
Yeah.
Was that explored? And I guess what were the cost differences between those two? I agree with you. I don't know that Find More Illinois is that it's working that great for us. So just curious about the other option.
Yeah, so our goal with Find More was there was quite a discussion. So because Find More Illinois is a Rails project, our primary goals in joining were to expand resource sharing of CCS materials to libraries that can't necessarily afford CCS membership, as well as supporting what could become an alternative to OCLC because of the high cost of OCLC. And then it was sort of not a tertiary goal, but we knew going in that Find More wouldn't really, at its current state, cannot replace ILL from OCLC for CCS libraries. We knew that going in. So we didn't look at Lincoln because our primary goal wasn't getting more materials. It was to support this project and see if it could expand enough that it could become a viable alternative for OCLC. So that expansion hasn't happened yet. And that's also why we gave kind of an initial 2-year commitment, was that we know that things aren't going to change overnight. But we talked a lot about like, there has to become it has to reach a point of like critical mass before it becomes this potential alternative. And does CCS joining push the project to that critical mass sooner and then attract other big libraries? It's like, oh, well, Evanston's in it. Like I could be in it too and get cool stuff from Evanston. Haven't really seen that happen. So that's where the recommendation, well, again, we're not actually making a recommendation yet because we're not at that point. But that growth hasn't really happened yet. In particular in the academic sector, like it's not going to succeed unless there are significant academic library participators. And while we're hoping that will happen over the next several months, it hasn't happened yet. And then we have been dealing with some buggy behavior that has literally just been resolved last week. So after a follow-up meeting we have on Tuesday, we'll be sending out some more information about that bug. But that was a very long answer. I apologize. But we didn't look at Lincoln. And it wasn't a cost-driven decision. It was like a philosophical decision. But we recognize that there are significant costs to that. And if we're not seeing the benefits to the Illinois community that we hoped to see, it's not worth the investment or the continued investment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Then I'm going to switch to the actual budget document. So this is version 2 budget. The version 1 budget I sent you, I actually have the wrong billing number here because I was going back and forth so much with like what the increases should or might look like. The correct number was in the library billing document though. So if you were like, how does that affect my fees? The fee document had the updated number. So as you can see, we're anticipating that we'll start the fiscal year with a little bit more than we planned. Did I just do that? Can you see the purple line on my screen?
I think I accidentally did it.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I'm like, what did I do? We had budgeted for our ending balance to be about $660,000, but I think it will be higher than that, which gives us again that we do have to keep a reserve. And this is our ending balance guidelines for our reserve. It's between 25 and 50% of previous year operating. So even operating at a deficit again next year, we are right in the middle of our required, but like our policies required reserves. I am happy to go through individual budget document sheets. We hit kind of the high points, like the salary line increase. We talked about Datacom. There's an increase in legal, a temporary increase in legal that we expect would go back down in future years. Again, if we need more contract assistance. Were there questions about the budget document, concerns, things you want to talk about? My prepared remarks have concluded, essentially. There is on the development fund, we budgeted $25,000 for interest this year. We're projected to be higher than that, but we anticipate interest rates are going to go down. So I reduced from where we're projected. Again, the rail support grant that amount is already set. And then This year I added a tab for the like a worksheet essentially for the development fund because there is a significant amount of spending in here where it's usually like one thing. So CCS will be recommending to governing board that we adopt Orange Boy, which we did talk about last time. If you remember at the last meeting, my initial estimate for Orange Boy was like $150,000 or $135,000 based on like my research before they had given us pricing. And interestingly, I was very close. That is the pricing they gave us for what we're calling scenario B. In scenario A, which is what we are planning to recommend to governing board, all CCS members and CCS staff will have access to the Orange Boy analytics tool. What would not be included though is the like messaging, like the NPS marketing messaging components that some libraries are already subscribed to. It would also not include incident reporting, which is like another add-on thing. If we wanted to provide that full suite of Orange Boy tools to all members, although I still don't think it includes incident reporting, that would be $150,000. But based on a very brief discussion at the governing board planning meeting, as well as knowing that there are members using other tools or that this cost may not be something that all members would want to move forward with, like marketing's not really the CCS role. We're recommending the smaller package, although we are working with Orange Boy to set up pricing for CCS members that might want to add on those other pieces. So that is the difference in Orange Boy pricing from what I estimated at the last meeting and what is here in the budget. Where are people at?
I will just say, I don't see anything here that's, kind of out of control. I think it's reasonable. I appreciate the detailed information about Orange Boy. I think with, a lot of these, they're already fixed costs. So it's not like you're going to change them. So it is what it is. And I'm glad to hear about Find More, that we are kind of looking at what does that look like when this contract ends? Is this really the best use of our resources? So I appreciate the overview that you've given here today.
Okay.
I'm personally feeling very thankful that we've been so careful with money in previous years to save up and be able to do, like, implement so many different things. I'm not on the executive committee, and I imagine they've already talked to you about staff overload for bringing on libraries, Orange Boy, discovery stuff. So I'm sure you guys already talked about that and have awareness. But I'm really thankful that like, I don't remember, you said the average price is going up like $2,500, something like that. Like all this for just $2,500 more. Like we were looking at Orange Boy ourselves, as you know, Rebecca, and it was going to be well more than $2,500, and we're going to get actually the stuff we actually want. So that makes it. This is making us money, or saving us money, not making us money.
I am hoping at. I have an inquiry out to Orange Boy to get list pricing, which is, essentially a racket in general, but I would like to present that to governing board when we get that far as well. I was hoping to have it for today, but do not. Especially like we try to be very conservative when adding new folks to the team. And I'm like, could we add Orange Boy without adding a person? But I just think there will be better adoption and better use and better value. And like, better data with someone to like shepherd it and have that be a primary focus for them. And talking with, we've been doing a lot of reference checks, and the reference checks have sort of morphed from like, do you like Orange Boy? Because spoiler alert, everybody likes Orange Boy. Everyone that's using it, they like it, that we know of. Except for like, there are some folks in CCS that are like, I just feel like I'm not getting what I should out of it. So we've been talking a lot about like, what does your department look like? How does your workflow, like, what kind of questions do you answer? So there's a great community out there that I think we can learn from and build off of. So the member fee structure is the same. Again, we have a new library worksheet wherein we pull out a library that will have some implementation months. So Vernon will have implementation pricing, which is this reduced monthly rate for 3 months, and then they'll have 9 full months. So that's why if you look at this new library worksheet and look at the CCS membership, like the percent of holes are different, these even splits are different, because Vernon has a couple months of like a discount. And so we calculate that first and then remove Vernon's pricing from the total billings and then recalculate everybody else. So that's where we get those final numbers.
Rebecca, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Anthony, are you the treasurer again next fiscal year?
Only if I'm elected.
Oh, are you running for it? I don't actually know.
Or is that
I
not
don't
true?
remember.
No, I think you'll still be the treasurer. You don't have to be elected. Mhm.
I think you have 1 more year because you had a
Yes.
partial
Mhm.
term, and now this is
Ah.
your 2nd year of your full term.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
So Anthony, I feel like 7 years ago is when we last looked at these prices, like the 75-25. And I'm not looking to make a change or suggest a change, but maybe next year would be the time for us to have a conversation, a more in-depth conversation, to see if the 75-25 is still what we want to do, and and recap the reasons why we decided to do that, and just really dig into it, because it's been 7 years, and I don't want it to become like 10 years and then eventually like, well, it's always been that way. So I'm not suggesting a change. I'm suggesting that we just put it on the agenda for early next year, just to discuss if the 75-25 split is still. And we might want to go 60-40. We might want to go 80-20. I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I'm just suggesting we have the conversation.
Good point, Mick. Thank you.
Not this year. It's too late this year.
It's too late this year. Hard agree. I'm happy to look at it again next year. And then we did adjust how we do the OCLC pricing last year. And as a result of that, still have some easement or like support that we're offering libraries that saw an increase due to that. So this year they'll get half of what they got last year, and next year they'll get half of that, and then the following year they'll be on their own. So that's why there's kind of this extra chunk in here. And then the summary page includes last year in gray and this year, or this coming year, in green. Here for review.
Funny, looking at health insurance prices, this looks so reasonable. I would love to have a 3% increase in health insurance.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's been explaining to me like the goings on of the WIN board, and it's fascinating. So thank you for your service, WIN board members.
Yeah, no. Yes, thank you. You're welcome. I just wait for Beth to vote, and then I vote whatever she says. So that's how I go.
No, I
Wise.
vote based on you.
Then we're in big trouble, Beth.
Stop sharing like all over the place. Are there other questions about this? I mean, I can turn it back over to Anthony to.
I have a question about the discovery layer. It seems like you've already put in the $150,000, and there was 2, the 150 and 180. Which was which?
What do you think, Mick? I just so the CCS
Assuming
recommendation.
CCS, the triple I was the more expensive one.
You are incorrect.
Wow.
So Yeah. So CCS is Gayatri's finalizing her report now. CCS has recommended that we move forward with Vega. And database management has accepted that recommendation, but it was not unanimous. I have already told Gayatri that I think she has put in a lot of great work, and her analysis I think is very clear and I think convincing. Um, and I think there are some very strong feelings on governing board, and that I cannot say that, like, oh yeah, we'll get there and everyone will be like, sure, Vega, let's go. So I'm interested in the discussion. So yeah, Innovative is pushing, and they're looking to be very competitive on price. That was not our primary factor in decision making, but it never hurts. But I anticipate there will be some lively discussion at governing board. So I didn't want the budget to be hamstrung by any false assumptions on my part.
I appreciate you budgeting for the larger amount. I just want to know which one that was.
It was Bibliocommons, yeah. Mhm.
All right, any other questions about the draft budget? Do we feel comfortable to take a vote to advance this to governing board?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mick. All right, so I have a motion from Wilburn and a second from Jacobson. Any further discussion? Let's vote.
Austin,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Jakaki,
Yes.
Ishwar. Thumbs up. And Wilburn.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you to CCS, Rebecca, Beth, wonderful job. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful questions. We have a budget, or we have the next step of a budget. Feels delightful. Next on our agenda is the development fund list, and I actually did not update the old list yet, but it is, oops, screen 2, hang on. I would propose that we put the things that we're planning to spend money on that list, and that we don't need anything else on the list at that time. For those of you who might be new to the committee, every year we update a list of potential uses of the development fund. It's a non-binding list, but it is something we do to justify carrying a balance in the development fund. So I think as we'll be spending it, these are reasonable things to include on the list.
I agree.
Looks good to me.
Okay. So I can include that with the governing board version of the budget, a cleaned up version of the list.
That's great.
For the Find More, which we already discussed, like you said, we're not seeing other libraries or consortiums joining. I don't know if this is a governing board conversation, but I don't know that we've also pushed that other libraries or influenced or try to use our influence to have other libraries join. We just kind of joined and like it's Rails problem now.
To some degree, yes. And we, that is correct. Yes, we have not lobbied other libraries to join. I would say that is in part because of the workflow issues we've been having. So Rails is introducing a lender-only option only for academic libraries, and they have some pilot libraries lined up and hope, but it's like they've been saying it for like months, and it needs to happen to see if there's an impact. So both on our use of Find More as well as on other membership interest. But yeah, I mean, when we look at the libraries that are in Find More, like I would make a stronger argument for staying if it actually was more of the under-resourced libraries in Illinois and they were getting access to materials that they couldn't get, with their own budgets or through OCLC, but that's not really what we're seeing. And I don't know if that'll change. But I don't know, probably not in the next 6 months when we start our analysis and make our recommendation.
Would libraries still be able to join individually to find more?
Absolutely. Yes. The First Swan Library is joining imminently. So they'll just have one member of their consortium on. Prairie Cat has a few members in, so that's definitely an option. We did have Treasurer's Bond on the agenda. I will just give a quick update. We did reduce the amount of spending for the Treasurer's Bond based on the the statutory requirement dropping from 50% to 10%. Given the sort of like de minimis amount of maintaining that treasurer's bond, I'm recommending we continue to maintain it, as our treasurer does have the ability to log in and approve things within the bank, since we do so many electronic payments. Our neighboring consortia are really a mix of they do and don't have the bond, or like the executive director has the bond, but I'm like, aren't you covered by directors in office? So I'm not recommending any changes at this time, but we will be updating the policy to more directly refer to the statute, which I thought we had done before, but I don't think that we actually did. So Beth is on it for bylaws and policy.
How much is it? It's like $100 or something.
Like 200.
250. Mm-hmm.
No, that's too high. No, just
Cut it out.
Anthony seems like a trustworthy guy. I think we're good.
We'll see what the next one looks like, though. Can't be too careful.
Your former ones were pretty bad. I know that.
Oh, don't I know it? It's funny because it's Mick. Former. Agenda. We already talked about CCS Investment Fund. So my list for the meeting is pretty wrapped. Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, so you don't require any action on these other items that were on the agenda that we were just alluding to. I mean, we kind of took the action with the development fund and the treasurer's bond. We're just going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the treasurer's bond generally doesn't require action, but if we were like, you know what, we don't need it, let's vote to remove it from the policies. But I don't think that I'd rather move with caution.
If Anthony pulls up in a Ferrari, we're calling this one back.
Yeah. Rebecca, do you need contact information for other investment firms so that you go outside just the Wintrust ecosystem? Because
yeah, if you're working with someone, then I'd be happy to take it.
I'm not going to give you the person we work with personally, because he's been working with us for 31 years and he reminds me every other week. But I would recommend Ellers and PMA.
Okay.
PMA is the big one in Illinois at the moment, and they have kind of like the Wintrust fund, and then they do investments back and forth, and they get billions of dollars under investment. And then Ellers, which is kind of smaller. Erica, you were gonna say?
I would say I'm getting ready to leave Ellers, so just to say.
They're kind of gotten a lot smaller in Illinois, it feels like. They're more concentrated in southern Wisconsin, it seems like. But PMA is the big one that I know of that you might, so if you want, they're happy to have a conversation anytime. And it's good to subscribe to their newsletter because they give lots of interesting information about the markets.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing that we'll be doing over the next bit that may come back to budget and finance is I have a staff member who's kind of going through all of our non-library agreements and seeing what, if any, cost savings we would realize if we were a nonprofit. Because CCS is not actually a library, we don't like we're not eligible for TechSoup, for example. And so some smaller vendors have just given us a discount when we're like, here's kind of what we do, and we're basically a library and we have a tax exempt number. But like Microsoft, for example, is a hard no. So would there be cost savings to moving to a not-for-profit status? Whereas before we looked at it 7 years ago, maybe more from a like operational and organizational standpoint, and there was not a significant benefit. So we are looking at that. I don't think will have a huge impact, but we'll circle back to this committee and it may show up on a future agenda.
Okay, other topics that we should be talking about today? I have just a quick question for the directors here. Anyone else get a call from the state library today about their relationship with First Search and OCLC? It looks like they're doing a little bit of exploratory research about the impact on our usage of certain databases. You may have heard that ERIC closed earlier. So I think there's some compression and they're maybe gauging to see just how much use is I don't know, whether they want to fund certain databases going forward. I assume this has to do with some of the defunding with IMLS, but just thought I would throw that out there. Okay. I guess if nothing else for the good of the whole, then I will declare this meeting adjourned at 2:37.